Welcome to the Stockout Omnichannel edition. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Baudendistel, joined by Grace Sharkey. We're going to talk Omnichannel today. And Grace, what's kind of your breakdown? Are you an in-store shopper, e-commerce person, a person who places an order and then picks it up? What are you in the Omnichannel spectrum?
Honestly, probably all three of those groups. I mean, depending on the situation and the store and the customer service aspect. I mean, there's some spots, I would not trust with deliveries, right? And more of a pickup location, if anything else. So yeah, I love all the channels. I'm an omni-channel person for sure. How about you?
Primarily e-commerce person, but I don't do most of the shopping in my household, so maybe I'm not the best person to ask. But we'll get into all that. We have Alex Berry, Flexport's Vice President of Omnichannel, on today to talk about that. But first, I want to make sure everyone knows how to sign up for the Stockout newsletter. You can do that at www.freightwaves.com/the Stockout, or just go to FreightWaves, what I call the site, and go up to newsletters, and under supply chains, go to Stockout. I should stop calling it just the site, because now we have a GoSonar.com a site for the data side of the business. That's another one I would encourage you to check out. And we're going to go through a couple of news stories. But before we do that, want to thank our sponsor, which is Nikola. Discover the future of transportation today. Visit Nikola's website and explore their zero emissions Class 8 truck. Transform your fleet and lead the charge in sustainable logistics. Learn more at NikolaMotor.com. So big thanks to Nikola Motor. Still working on pronouncing it Nicola and not Nicola. I want to say Nicola. Production tells me that's not right.
It sounds like the cough drop, but that's probably why. Right?
Yeah. It's kind of like Porsche. It's like you have to pronounce it the way after the person that it was named after. But I'm going to get into our first topic, which is the reefer market. Refrigerated transportation shows some signs of tightening, and kind of interesting. Both myself and also Zach Strickland chose to write about the reefer market in our latest, write up, mine for the Stockout newsletter, Zach's for the chart of the week. And this is an interesting chart, I think. So this is the reefer tender rejection rate. 2024 is in white, and you see for this time of the year, considerably higher than it was the past 2 years. And really what supported this and drove some of this, writing about the reefer market is there was a call that we had last week with large broker that is a Sonar customer that does a lot of reefer, particularly out of the West Coast. And he saw, kind of a change in the market, sort of different than he's seen the past couple of years. And some of the things that he said was past couple of years that they were consistently told that his rates were too high. Shippers were telling him that his rates were too high, but now he's being told that his rates are priced competitively, being told that by the shipper, and then also seeing carriers basically reject loads at rates that they had not seen in recent years. So I guess from this broker's perspective, has seen a major, at least a meaningful shift in the reefer market out of the West Coast from all of their anecdotes. That Sonar chart that we just showed seems to bear that out, where you're seeing higher tender rejection rates right now. 13.8% was closer to 20% right at the beginning of November, but you sort of look at a year ago and it was in the single digits. So it does seem like something is changing there. So you can check out my newsletter, which I just kind of touched on that briefly, but then for a little bit more detail, you can go to Zach Strickland's Chart of the Week article, which went up on the FreightWaves.com site over the weekend, and Zach goes into more detail. He has more experience with that sector than I do. Talks about how the tender rejection rates have averaged about 14% since October. That's compared to about 8% during the same period in 2023. You can see that on the chart that we're showing on the screen. And then it suggests that they're showing there's some degree of tightening as we approach the protect from freeze season, which is kind of ironic that there's the protect from freeze season is when it starts to get cold, that you need more refrigerated when it gets cold. But I guess that's because things can't get too cold. It's really more temperature controlled rather than just refrigerated. And also the reefer spot rates. He says reefer spot rates have not yet risen sustainably, and that suggests that shippers are not yet resorting to using a lot of this in the spot market. So there's not just a lot of spot volume just yet. But our data suggests things are starting to change. And I guess from your perspective, do you think this could be a sign for what's to come for dry van?
It's tough because I will say right now, especially the last couple of weeks, if you include that as well, in those statistics, we are hitting Christmas tree season. So I think that is a big part of maybe what is pulling some of that volume. I will say as well, over in the Midwest, we have had not the most ripe Christmas tree conditions. So a part of me wonders if some of that activity could be more of these long distance tree hauls and in those situations, depending on what the temperature was. Like you were saying before, the reefers are often used as almost like a temperature control compared to anything. Plus, if you add in a lot of the weather that we've seen in the Northeast and the Midwest over the past week and a half, as someone who has had the wonderful opportunity to experience it, it's been a lot of snow. So, of course, depending on what is moving, those reefers could be being used for that reason. Do I 100% think that that will translate back over into van? Not 100%, but it is. I'd probably the tree season will die down here. I think in the next following week. It will have to. I mean, right? At some point, the trees won't need to be bought anymore. I think we'll also see a lot of the holiday goods and foods as well start to die down. So I think near the end of the month, I'd probably feel more comfortable making that call. But it is interesting to see, and especially where that shippers that you mentioned, I wonder if some of that reefer uh, volume is being pulled into maybe some more long distance tree moves compared to the short ones, which usually can just go on a van with some. I mean, I've seen guys just throw some ice in there to kind of keep things moist, even though everyone hates that word. But still, I think there's maybe some conditions that are pulling that. I like to see if maybe more long term stability, like you're saying, at that rejection rate, but we'll continue to watch it right up for the next couple weeks.
Interesting. I guess I hadn't appreciated that the Christmas trees have to be refrigerated. Is that right?
Well, yeah, and it depends. Like if it's going a longer distance, and depending on what the temperature is outside that it's traveling, because you can also dry out the trees by using the reefer. So it depends on the mileage. But again, if some of that volume of trees is needed more in the Midwest or other locations in the United States that had different weather conditions this past year, then I could see maybe some of that pulling that too. You could do a reefer too, like more for a short distance. But again, it depends on like what the temperature the tree was pulled out at, and of course like where it's going to as well. So that could potentially be what's pulling that. A lot of guys will turn the reefer off too and just run it as a van, right? So I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Christmas tree rates, but they are a beauty for this time of year. So I can see guys kind of maneuvering themselves for that market for that short period of time.
Interesting. So many seasonal aspects to freight transportation, for sure. Want to move on to another topic that I think goes really to the heart of this omnichannel discussion, which is returns. There's been some interesting articles in the media past few days. This is kind of the year where there's uptick in returns. This article from CNBC, another article from Wall Street Journal. I can run through a few of these stats, which I think are pretty interesting. So they say that the returns are expected to be about 17% of all goods, up from about 15% last year. I believe they're just talking about e-commerce. Processing the returns costs retailers an average of 30% of the item's original price. McKinsey says that retailers pay $21 to $46 to process just a single item. In 2023, 81% of retailers rolled out stricter policies like shorter windows or where you can return them for free, or restocking free fees, which the consumers just really don't seem to like. 76% of the consumers say that the free returns is a key factor in deciding where they're going to shop. Some consumers will just stop shopping a place if they don't offer the free returns. And part of the issue here is that there's a significant number of fraudulent returns. That one example of the guy who sold the $1,000 Lego set and the person returned back an empty box. That must have hurt. I think it sounded like it was a small toy shop too that was victim of that. And then some are doing this kind of multi-tier return fees where, depending on your loyalty status or if you have the subscription that company has, depends on what your fees are. And then H&M, and this is maybe where the industry is going, it has a personalized return fee where sounds like it's a sliding scale. If you don't return very often, maybe it's free. If you return all the time, maybe there is a fee. But what do you think is the ultimate solution to this return problem, which seems to be a growing issue because people, I guess, will order something, they don't know if they're medium or large, and return the one that doesn't fit.
Yeah, I would say that from my personal experience, that's a lot of times what my returns are, is those situations, right, where it's maybe that particular product isn't available in the store, so I'm kind of just hoping and guessing. And I mean, that I think goes back to a sizing issue, more systemic issue in that regards. But I mean, we talked, returns are a huge problem for most supply chains, let alone this beautiful retail space during this time of the year. I've seen even more, I feel like, final sales, right, where it's like you can't even return these items. I've seen that a lot more this past year. That could do with also the inventory issues kind of finally pushing itself out as well. But I definitely have seen more of less of like the easy, convenient, free way, right? Just dropping it off at a UPS store and keeping it moving, and definitely more of the fees attached to it, which it depends. I'd have to track prices, but I would be more willing to pay for return than have that maybe be sunk into the original purchase costs that have done or used for that item. So if I'm seeing prices go down and maybe returned items pricing goes up, I'm actually would be fine with that. I think most consumers probably would, depending on the store. But yeah, it's a huge problem, and maybe one that we'll get into a little bit here with our guests, I think, as well.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and intro our guest?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm very excited to have this company on the show as well. And we have with us today Alex Berry, Flexport's VP of Omnichannel. Perfect for this wonderful Omnichannel episode as well. Alex, thank you so much for joining us this Monday morning. Happy to have you on the show. Oh, we got him muted. Can we get his sound back on for us? Let's see. Oh, still on mute. Let's see. We'll have the guys work on. While they work on him, Mike, did you get any holiday shopping done this weekend? Is it all e-commerce for you?
It is. If I have not been to a store, but Dallas, the stores are really crowded because it's just a growing population and this time of year, and it's just e-commerce, I think, is the way to go.
I keep forgetting. Yeah, you're in a big city like that. Yeah, it's not. It's not as fun.
We can hear you.
There we go.
Alex,
yes, we can. Let's bring him back on, Alex. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you dealing with our technical issues. But let's see. Happy to have you back here on the show.
No worries at all, and thank you for having me. Very much looking forward to it.
No, let's dive right into it. So we just finished up this past, two past weekends, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Our last episode actually was on Cyber Monday, so we get a chance to review those numbers. How did that turn out for Flexport, and especially through its omni-channel services and for its customers?
Yeah, we saw a really big Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. So we were super pleased kind of with what we saw. So definitely, strong demand. So for us, it was the most orders we ever received kind of during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Black Friday was actually the biggest day in our fulfillment history. So that was great to see. And just to put some numbers to it, merchants who were with us both last year and this year, their orders were up about 12% on Black Friday, and through the full Cyber 5, they were up about 17%. So awesome to see.
Yeah, you get such a surge of orders this time of year. How does a company like yours deal with having such a large surge of orders there, and while also having an efficient cost structure?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question, and it's certainly one we spend a lot of time on. So I think, some of the context that might be helpful is one of the big initiatives we undertook this year. So when Flexport acquired Shopify Logistics about a year and a half ago, Shopify Logistics was operating out of, upwards of 40 warehouses across the United States. And, I would call these smaller warehouses. So think 50,000 square feet to 200,000 square feet. And the majority of those were operated through third parties. And the big initiative that we've undertaken the last 12 months is to consolidate those, 40 plus warehouses into 5 first party hubs across the US. So we've got locations, Los Angeles, Dallas, Atlanta, New Jersey, Chicago. Those are all about 1 million square foot buildings plus that are operated by our folks. So moving from that model of having these 40 plus warehouses into these 5 hubs across the country with our management has allowed us to drive a ton of quality for merchants, as well as improve our cost structure. In terms of quality, not only can we get inventory placed really, really well, and those 5 locations are going to be very common amongst, whether it's 3PLs or companies who do fulfillment, because you can be within 2 days of upwards of 80% of the US population in those 5 locations. So you can get really fast shipping for customers, or kind of give merchants that option to have fast shipping. But also with our managers in the building, us doing, for example, labor planning, our own forecasting, having better abilities to react to volatility we see from merchants, and then being able to, have, some merchants be a little bit higher than we expected, some merchants be a little bit lower than we expected, but having fewer buildings just gives us a better opportunity to absorb that volume. It also gives us just a really good ability from, an inventory integrity perspective, right? Trying to make sure we get units received correctly, we get them received fast, they're in inventory, they're sellable for these merchants, right? Having our managers in the building managing the process, knowing what's coming, has been super important. And then, as we've continued to grow in this business, one of the things we're really trying to emphasize is, how can we show merchants the value of leveraging Flexport, both from a freight perspective, but also from a fulfillment perspective. And we've seen more and more merchants doing that. And as merchants are using our freight products to move goods either into the country or within the country, that gives us a lot of upstream visibility to be able to see what's coming, right? Which just allows us to better plan our labor, understand what's coming, when it's going to show up, and just make sure that we've got the resources necessary to get that stuff inbounded into the network, quickly and accurately. And then, of course, from a cost structure perspective, right, when you're doing it yourself, you're managing the efficiencies, you're sort of finding ways to do this with less cost. You can make your own trade-offs in terms of, whether it's quality, whether it's cost. And obviously, we're going to prioritize quality over cost, but we've seen substantial cost structure improvements from that move from those, 40 sites operated by third parties into these larger sites operated by us. So we're super excited about that combination and that balance that we're able to strike.
Yeah, it's interesting that in your title in particular, right, dealing with all these different channels, and especially when we're starting to see not only, of course, your particular services, but even the capability of like TikTok shop, right, and being able to use more of these social channels to sell as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work with customers to navigate those different channels of purchasing? And does it, in order to fulfill those orders, is it tougher than, let's say, more of a direct-to-consumer situation compared to a purchase through a social platform?
It's a really good question. And it's something that we've grappled with a lot over the last, 6 to 9 months, just as something that continues to dynamically change as sort of time goes on. So I'll break it into 2 categories for you in terms of my answer. So the first one will be that, we see a lot of brands, historically brands may have operated with 1 or 2, downstream retailers, right? I'm going to sell at Target, I'm going to sell at Walmart, I'm going to sell at Costco, I'm going to sell on Amazon. Now we're seeing brands leverage more and more marketplaces, right? Some of our larger brands are selling on 4, 5, 6, 7 different marketplaces. And I'm obviously considering, something like TikTok as one of those marketplaces. And so those folks being able to operate with what we refer to as a single pool of inventory is super important. And what I mean by that is when you're doing manufacturing, and let's say you're doing manufacturing internationally, right? You don't know at the time of manufacturing where you're going to sell these units downstream. You're having to place those orders months in advance. You don't necessarily know where you're going to market. You don't know where your demand's going to come from. So being able to leverage a fulfillment provider or doing fulfillment yourself in a way that can be agnostic to those different marketplaces is super important, so that as you move those goods across the ocean into the United States, or even just you produce them domestically and you move them into storage in the United States, you don't necessarily know where they're going at that point yet either. So then being able to work with somebody who's able to help you, get units prepared accordingly, right? Because Amazon's got different preparation requirements as Walmart, as Target, and being able to place those correctly is super important. But, for somebody like a TikTok, for example, it gets a little bit more complicated in that there are different metrics that those folks will measure, right? So these merchants all have scores, whether it's with TikTok, whether it's with Amazon, whether it's with whichever marketplace, which will stack rank kind of their search results. And it'll obviously push their goods to more consumers, the better their scores are. And those scores are going to be driven by things like on-time shipping, things like on-time delivery. There's, a fair amount of inventory and kind of, stock rates that are important to that as well. So we do have to manage merchants who are using these different marketplaces a little bit differently. And, we've created, what we call high priority orders, right? And knowing what's going to impact their scores with these different marketplaces to make sure that when we're working through backlog, prioritizing orders, right, we're prioritizing those things first. So I think, that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing that's been really interesting is with a lot of these brands, we'll get into this a little bit later, I assume, but you see the stretching of sort of Black Friday, Cyber Monday a little bit. We saw sales a lot earlier this year than we have historically. But what we've seen with a lot of these brands working on TikTok and such is a lot of viral marketing. So whether that's leveraging influencers to do marketing or just getting, specific about what TikTok campaigns they're doing, which has inserted a lot of volatility into their demand structure, right? It's a little bit less predictable. So that's been really interesting to see as well. But there's a lot of positives to it just because when one of those things does go viral or does hit big, some of the unit levels we see from these merchants on a daily or a daily or a weekly basis is pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, so you really have to understand the algorithms. It sounds like, and that's a value that you can add.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, we try to do for these merchants is obviously, we as Flexport want to go partner with TikTok, with Amazon, with whomever else it is, right? And a huge part of that partnership is not only understanding how they're scoring or ranking merchants, but it's also making sure we're getting real-time feedback to make sure the way that, we're calculating those metrics, we're monitoring is matching. And there's a big question of, how do we basically do that on behalf of merchants so we can get out in front of it so they never have to come to us and say, hey, my score is in trouble, what's going on, right? We should be proactively managing that. So that's been a big priority over the last 6 months as well.
Yeah, and wanted to ask you also, it seems like maybe the typical seasonality is changing with maybe Black Friday starting earlier, like the Amazon deal days and whatever they call it, starting a lot earlier than that. And then other retailers trying to match what Amazon's doing. Now you have that combined with tariffs, and we don't know what's going to happen with Shein and with TikTok in the coming year. So sort of what's your sort of overall freight outlook, and how do you think that's going to trend throughout 2025?
Yeah, obviously, to your point, I wish I had the magic 8-ball. I don't necessarily have it, but I do think, the last couple of years, to your point, right, we have seen that stretching out a little bit. And it's a little bit less about the day of Black Friday and the day of Cyber Monday. And I think, we saw a lot of sales this year, even going into the weekend before Thanksgiving, right? So, you're talking 7-8 days before Black Friday when stuff started. And I think, you saw similar trends in China with 11/11 historically, right? Trying to spread it over, multiple weeks, an entire month. My opinion is I think that's what brands are starting to do is they're basically trying to make it into a holiday season of sales, right? How do I stretch this out as much as I possibly can, just so it's not so specific to those 2 days? Obviously, we're not complaining about that necessarily because it does help us stretch out that demand a little bit, right? When it's not so peaky on those days, it's a little bit easier for us to manage. But that's sort of what I would anticipate to be true in aggregate. But I do think there's a little bit of the flavor I mentioned a minute ago about, whether it's influencer advertising, whether it's advertising on TikTok, advertising on social media, right? When folks are kind of dropping these marketing campaigns and certain things are hitting, you are going to get that volatility. So I think it's going to be a longer period of time. There will still be volatility. I just think those peaks will have a little bit less magnitude.
Interesting stuff. Alex, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. Where can people go if they want to learn more about the omnichannel work that Flexport is in, and of course, maybe hit some of these deals as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it. I think you're going to get a bunch of information on our website. We've got a blog post out about kind of more details and kind of what happened during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's a great place. And if you're And if you're ever in doubt, feel free to hit up Ryan Peterson on Twitter. That's going to be a pretty effective way as well.
Yeah, wonderful job on Twitter. Types fast is a perfect handle for him, that's for sure. And as an avid shopper, I thank you for making sure that all of my systems are working and that products are getting everywhere for your customers as well. And for our audience, of course, make sure you go check out the Stockout newsletter. Go ahead, head to our website, FreightWaves.com, click on newsletters at the top of the page, join that. We also this Wednesday have a wonderful domestic supply chain summit to wrap up the year. So make sure you guys check that out on our YouTube page as well. And until then, thank you, Flexport, for joining us for the show. And for all of you, enjoy the rest of your week. We'll be back with you on Monday.